Got quite a bit to show you that you haven't seen before.
Walking onto the set of The Philosopher's Stone was a dream come true for Daniel, Emma and Rupert. Hogwarts was basically their playground. The film itself might deal with some serious issues, like a two-faced professor looking for the demise of one of his students, but for the most part, the behind the scenes was full of laughs, pranks, and adorable on-set crushes. Though there was one professor the actors were petrified of off-camera. Ready to find out who?
My name is Gareth Boones, I work for the RSPCA.
If Hogwarts was their playground, the rest of the children in the cast were the Golden Trio's classmates, which, as you can imagine, led to a lot of on-set chaos. It was near impossible to get them all focused at the same time. Director Chris Columbus says they were constantly laughing and fooling around in between takes, and sometimes even during takes. Look how adorable they all were. It might have taken some extra effort from the adults on set, but on the bright side, it led to impeccable on-screen chemistry. The audition process for Daniel, Emma and Rupert couldn't be any more different. For Daniel, it was just another day at the theatre with his parents when producer David Heyman, who had already had his eye on Daniel for the role, convinced him to just come in for an audition.
You would sign up for the entire series and it was all to be filmed in America.
But Daniel's parents weren't really up for relocating their 11-year-old son. Luckily, they ended up filming in the UK and it all worked out. Emma attended a drama class for her audition.
Basically, my school got an invitation.
After she was hand-selected from her classmates, she went on to audition 8 more times before she secured her spot. Rupert's audition is probably the most wild story we've heard so far. He heard about the open call auditions and sent in a video of himself, dressed as his drama teacher while performing a rap.
Then I made my own script thing up and sent it off.
It may have landed him an in-person audition, but it didn't save him from embarrassment. The Golden Trio had almost absolutely no experience in film, which led to a lot of nervous actors on the first day of filming.
I was terrified.
Not only were they acting, but they were learning the ins and outs of memorising lines and hitting their marks. Not to mention all the professional lingo. They made so many mistakes that director Chris said he had to film with multiple cameras. Each actor always had a camera on them. This was so they could catch as much footage as possible and piece it all together. That's why the first film is a little choppy. They couldn't get through a full scene without someone making a mistake.
Rupert, don't smile, and Emma, don't put your head out forward.
Chris deserves all the awards for how much effort he put into the film. He wasn't shy about how much he enjoyed working with actors, but he went the extra level for the amateur actors on set. A lot of the time he would be behind the cameras acting the scene out alongside Daniel, Emma and Rupert so they could take reference from him. Look at him go.
I always, laughed and said we should put a camera on Chris.
We don't have access to all the bloopers from the set, but we're willing to bet a lot of them would include Emma. While filming, she had a habit of mouthing everyone else's lines and ruining entire takes. We're sure they appreciated how focused and eager she was, but Emma says the whole process traumatised her.
I really wanted to do my job well, and I kind of overdid it.
She, of course, eventually worked through it. What would a movie set be without some pranks? For this franchise, at least in the early days, Daniel was the prankster mastermind.
I'm an angel. I'm an angel.
Sure you were, Dan. He was so good he managed to get a hold of Robbie Coltrane, also known as Hagrid's, phone and reprogram it from English to Turkish. Genius. Besides that, he was constantly wandering set looking for ways to prank people, performing magic tricks, and overall being cheeky. Normally, calling cut on set means everyone breaks character, but a lot of the time Alan Rickman, who played Snape, would remain in character between takes, which also meant Dan and Rupert were terrified of him both on and off camera.
I was constantly having to remind myself that it's only a film, it's only a film.
One time, Rupert drew a funny caricature of Alan Rickman while filming. Rupert was absolutely terrified when he realised Alan had noticed the drawing from over his shoulder. Luckily, this was one time Alan decided to break character.
I made him sign it and I have it in my possession.
Alan took it home and said it was something that was very dear to him. Our hearts. It wouldn't be a set full of preteens and teens without any crushes developing. We didn't know it at the time, but Emma Watson revealed years later that she had a major crush on Tom Felton from the ages of 10 to 12.
We love a bad guy, and he was a few years older, and he had a skateboard. And that just did it, really.
But Tom would refer to her as a little sister, and she had her heart torn in two. A lot of people wondered why they wrote out Hermione's huge buck teeth in the script. Well, it was because Emma Watson couldn't speak properly with them.
Teeth test. Teeth test.
She did multiple camera tests with them, and even filmed one scene with them that made it to the final cut. But ultimately, it just didn't work out. We all know the irony of people telling Harry,
You have your mother's eyes.
when Daniel indeed did not. Instead of the green eyes Harry has in the novel, Daniel had blue eyes, and it wasn't for lack of effort. Daniel did try and wear contacts, but had a painful allergic reaction that forced them to film without them. You know the scene at the end of The Philosopher's Stone where Harry is saying goodbye to Hagrid? His eyes were only puffy because he'd been wearing them. Does that count as method acting? The floating candles in the Great Hall are iconic, and they knew they had to get them perfect. At first, they were using real candles hung with fishing line, but those candles started melting and falling on the actors below. Yikes. That meant they only had 1 or 2 takes to get the grand entrance perfect. So, the reaction you see from the first years here is the actual reaction from the kids. It was the first time they had seen that set.
No acting required.
Speaking of the Great Hall, director Chris says that those were the most difficult scenes to film. That's because they had to control over 300 children in one space. Even the child actors themselves don't know how he managed it.
I don't know how he does it.
He used various techniques to get everything perfect, but then reblocking for another take would take forever.
Let the feast begin.
The Great Hall just seems to be the place where everything went awry. You know that delicious looking food that always lines the tables in the films? Well, for the first film, that food was very real and needed to last them through 3 days of filming. Under the heat of the set lights, there was no way that food was staying fresh, which meant the hall didn't smell very pleasant. The Philosopher's Stone is like 99% focused on just children, which meant in order to film the movie at the time, they had to petition for UK labour law adjustments. They managed to get the kids on set for 9 hours a day, but only about 4 to 5 of those hours were filming. The rest were dedicated to school and breaks.
It's tough, but we had brilliant kids and they did really well.
Owls play a huge role in all of the films, and to take the movie realism to a whole new level, Chris managed to use real, live-trained owls. It wasn't easy, but they managed to do it.
Mail's here.
The magical scene where the owls swoop in to deliver the student's post was shot by filming owls individually and then editing them all together later on.
Owls are beautiful creatures, but they are difficult to train.
Filming a Harry Potter movie might sound like a magical experience for a young actor, and it was. But it was also a huge challenge. After the huge success of the first film, the cast and crew came back for the Chamber of Secrets raring to go. But when it came to balancing schoolwork, tons of CGI, a cast of hundreds, and everything else, filming the second Harry Potter movie was no easy feat. We're taking a look at some of the most amazing behind-the-scenes moments from the Chamber of Secrets. You might think that the young actors and hard-working crew would have been given a break between filming the first Harry Potter film and the Chamber of Secrets, but nope. They started shooting the second movie only 2 days after the first premiered, and coming back to work was like getting a big family back together. After getting all of the introductions out of the way in the first movie, the second time around allowed them to not only make the Chamber of Secrets more funny, but also way darker and far more action-packed. The director, Chris Columbus, was so excited to be able to direct more of the action, and Daniel Radcliffe was definitely on board when it came to making the audience laugh. While they mostly stuck to the script, a few key lines from the Chamber of Secrets were actually improvised. First, the hilarious moment when Malfoy turns to Goyle, or Harry disguised as Goyle, and says,
I didn't know you could read,
was made up by Tom Felton because he forgot his line. And secondly, when Jason Isaacs says,
Potter will always be around to save the day.
He came up with it on the spot. Luckily, Daniel Radcliffe was right there with him, as his response,
Don't worry, I will be,
was totally off the top of his head. According to Daniel, all of the flying car sequences took around a month to film, which meant that he and Rupert were trapped together in a tiny car for 4 weeks. Luckily, he thought Rupert was hilarious, and the two kept each other laughing. even after flying right into the Whomping Willow.
Oh yeah, that was really fun.
It's clear that they had a great time because Dan said,
"Those were some of the best filming days, I think."
And they had only just begun. Rupert and Daniel weren't the only ones who became fast friends, because it turns out that even though they might be rivals on screen, Dan and Tom Felton, who plays Malfoy, actually get along really well.
But we're not really enemies, we love each other really.
They had a lot of fun filming their Quidditch scenes, spending hours hanging from the ceiling in front of a giant blue screen, joking around between takes. After the huge success of the first movie, they were able to spend a little less time worrying and a lot more time having fun on the set of the Chamber of Secrets, even doing things that seemed like the complete opposite of a good time. For example, the scene where Ron has to throw up a bunch of giant slugs might be a nightmare to most of us. But for Rupert, it was a whole other story.
They tasted quite nice, actually.
They even let him choose the flavor. 3 new big characters were introduced in the second movie: Lucius Malfoy, Gilderoy Lockhart, and of course, Dobby. But this movie was made before the days of motion capture and super realistic CGI, so acting opposite Dobby was actually a big challenge for Daniel Radcliffe.
Challenging on the part of the visual effects team, and challenging on the part of Dan Radcliffe.
Dobby wouldn't be created until after the movie was filmed, so he spent the entire time acting opposite an orange ball. Nowadays, they might shoot the entirety of Hogwarts on a green screen, but back then they did almost all of it for real. One of the most complicated tasks was building Dumbledore's office, which took over 250 people to do, for just that one room! Along with building the space, they had to commission a handful of different artists to paint all of the portraits and paintings that hang on his walls. Playing Quidditch might look like an amazing amount of fun, but it turns out it took quite a bit of getting used to. According to Daniel Radcliffe, in the first movie, it was actually really painful to spend so long up there sitting on a tiny broomstick suspended by wires. But luckily, by the time the Chamber of Secrets came around, they had figured out a way for it to be a lot less painful and way more fun. By rigging in more comfortable seats and footrests, and using wires to keep their weight off of the broom. According to Chris Columbus, the main trio quickly went from actors with no experience to seasoned professionals from the first movie to the second.
I've developed as a person so much, everybody on set has.
Everything got a little easier and started to flow more the second time around. And what once took 10 to 15 takes to nail down only took 3 or 4 on the Chamber of Secrets. Even though they may have been becoming best friends, that didn't mean that Daniel, Emma, and Rupert were free from teasing each other every now and again. In fact, they did it all the time.
Why are you so determined to embarrass me?
Because they were all growing at different rates, they were all racing to keep up with one another, especially Emma, who was the only girl in the group. But don't worry, Rupert and Daniel didn't gang up on her, and she could totally hold her own.
I am taller than you, or I will make myself taller than you.
The young actors were really excited to see their characters grow and change from where they were in the first year at Hogwarts to the second. Daniel Radcliffe was intent on making Harry more grounded the second time around. In the first movie, he was more just reacting to things around him, and in the second, he really started to take charge of his world. Emma Watson said that Hermione definitely relaxed a bit for the second film.
Hermione definitely becomes more sort of easygoing.
Ron stepped into the big brother role with Ginny now enrolled at Hogwarts, and also with his new owl, who, as Rupert Grint put it, is...
Who's really, really stupid and clumsy.
One thing that everyone in the cast and crew could agree upon is that Chris Columbus was the absolute best director for the job. Not only was he a great leader, he also knew exactly how to talk to the young actors and get the best work out of them.
He manages to get the whole set completely psyched up.
While some directors sit in another room looking at the monitor and never speaking to the cast, Chris did exactly the opposite and was super hands-on the entire time. Having already been working together as a giant family for over a year on the Chamber of Secrets, the actors finally started to feel like they could step out of their comfort zones a little bit.
One thing that the success of the first film enabled us to do was to sit back and be a little more relaxed.
For Dan, he was so shy during the first movie that he would never offer his opinion about anything other than a funny prank or two. But when it came to the second one, he was a lot more comfortable and started sharing his ideas and thoughts with the director and really getting into the work.
In the second, I kind of have a bit more confidence with putting ideas forward.
According to Emma Watson, one of the biggest challenges of being a young actor on a giant Hollywood set is trying to fit everything in. Because while most kids their age would be in school full-time, all of the school-age Harry Potter actors had to be tutored on set during the day, while also filming the movie for up to 12 hours a day. They would run from the set to the tutoring trailer for a 15-minute lesson, back to hair and makeup, and on set again all day long. After all this, it seems like making the Chamber of Secrets was an amazing experience for everyone involved, and we're sure that none of the crew would trade it even for a second.
We enter completely our own world.
The Prisoner of Azkaban is one of the best Harry Potter movies, but it's also when things started getting serious. On set, things were more lighthearted. The actors pulled pranks on each other, and Emma Watson had fun punching Tom Felton, even though it wasn't in the script. How did they pull off such a dark film and turn it into a blast behind the scenes? Let's find out.
Lumos Maxima!
This Lumos scene at the beginning of the third movie had some fans questioning Wizarding World rules. Wouldn't Harry get in trouble for using charms outside of school? But regardless, filming the scene was fun. And a bit sweaty.
I wouldn't touch that. It's very wet.
Harry seems to be in his own private cocoon. But on set, Daniel had director Alfonso Cuarón telling him what to do under that blanket. He was sitting on this illuminated platform that had him feeling a bit warm, and technicians were controlling the light from his wand. Hermione punching Draco will forever go down in Harry Potter history as one of the most satisfying moments of the series. But according to Tom Felton, the scene wasn't supposed to include a punch at all.
Actually, originally said in the script that Hermione slaps Draco.
The punch idea came when both actors decided they wanted to add a little intensity to the scene. Apparently, Emma has a pretty good punch, and she enjoyed every minute of it.
Emma was looking forward for that moment.
Harry Potter might be the chosen one, but even he's not above getting pranked by his professors. For this scene in the Great Hall, Michael Gambon and Alan Rickman teamed up to put a fart machine in Daniel Radcliffe's sleeping bag so it would go off while filming. Not even Dumbledore could keep a straight face. Making Harry invisible takes a lot of CGI and a green cloak, which can be a bit hard to take seriously. In this scene, they used string to get Ron's hat and Hermione's hair to move, but the actors had trouble not cracking up when Daniel threw off his green cloak and popped in, just like 3 kids having a snow day.
That was not funny.
The first person who ever really made Daniel feel starstruck on set was Gary Oldman. But isn't it fitting that Daniel looked up to the actor playing his on-screen godfather? The two ended up developing a bond similar to Sirius and Harry's. Daniel also had this to say about movies 3 and 5, which he thinks were his best performances.
I think that is in part to do with the fact that I have Gary Oldman around.
Speaking of Sirius Black, Sirius's disheveled look for the movies included wild hair, a grungy beard, and those awesome Nordic-inspired tattoos. Even though his body art was never mentioned in the books, Alfonso Cuarón and Gary Oldman decided to make the character theirs.
I look like I've escaped from prison, don't you think?
Oldman came up with Sirius's hairstyle, while Cuarón designed all the tattoos himself. As director, Alfonso Cuarón came up with a lot of the film's vision, even though he had never even read the series before getting hired. Working with kids definitely had its challenges. He had a swear jar to try and keep himself from cursing in front of the young cast, but he still had a great time on set.
I would always be going to him, how should I do it? Just tell me what to do. And he'd go, no, you've got to do it yourself.
He helped get the young actors where they needed to be emotionally, and he even let them improvise some of their lines, like in this scene, where he encourages Emma to follow her instincts.
If it helps, keep it.
Yeah.
The final design for the Dementors was also heavily influenced by Cuarón. The crew tried a lot of different techniques to get them right, like having them on strings, then puppeteered in the water, before they finally settled on CGI.
I was a little hesitant about CG, so I wanted to do everything old school.
It's the slow movement, extra long cloaks, and layers of fabric that end up making the final result so perfect.
Isn't he beautiful? Say hello to Buckbeak.
Prisoner of Azkaban introduced us to Care of Magical Creatures and Buckbeak. But creating the hippogriff behind the scenes was both fun and challenging. The animatronic model really moves and was made of hand-cut and painted feathers. It took a huge team 4.5 months to create 3 of them for filming. Check out Daniel riding this motion rig on set so they could later finish the scene with CGI. Alfonso Cuarón seems to be full of good advice and always knows exactly what to tell his actors to get a good performance. One tip he gave Daniel was to picture his celeb crush, Cameron Diaz, in a bikini during scenes like this, when he needed to look shocked or taken aback. And it worked. Another fun fact is that Emma Watson's crush was actually on set with her. She admitted she had a bit of a thing for Tom Felton.
He was a few years older and he had a skateboard.
Rupert Grint loved feeling like a family while filming the movies, but he admits it felt a little suffocating at times. He even compared it to Groundhog Day, because it felt like coming back and doing the same thing over and over again. He revealed on the Armchair Expert podcast that Prisoner of Azkaban was actually the very last Harry Potter film he ever watched, and he's never continued past that point. Daniel has also admitted to having some issues with anxiety and getting used to fame, but he doesn't regret his experience.
Everyone always expects me to not want to talk about it or anything, but I really don't mind.
As for Emma, she almost did a very Hermione-like thing and quit when she was 16 to focus on her education. During the first few movies, the cast had to do their homework on set between takes and even at their Hogwarts desks. But for the third movie, the director decided to merge their homework and character study together. There's a famous story about Cuarón assigning the trio to each complete an essay about their character. Of course, Emma did the most by writing an amazing paper, while Daniel did the bare minimum, and Rupert didn't finish his at all.
So please, I've done it. So I have mine. The next day Emma comes in with all 16 pages of hers.
Being in school also made their schedules pretty crazy. Each day when filming was done, they had to go to tutoring.
Everybody go off to lovely school.
This Swamping Willow scene was fun to film, and maybe just a bit dangerous. Emma hopped on a fake branch to be swung around, but most of the close-up shots of the duo escaping were accomplished by having the camera act as a branch itself. It was a fun, high-speed scene to film, but all expertly choreographed. Lupin transforming into a werewolf in the movie is impressive, sure, but it's even more impressive watching him transform behind the scenes. There were a lot of prosthetics involved.
Watch yourself become unrecognizable was exciting.
They filmed half the scene before putting him in makeup and then continued as he was turning. They also had to create this very convincing werewolf suit.
We're in the Shrieking Shack, aren't we?
For scenes in the Shrieking Shack, the crew didn't just rely on CGI. Instead, they built an actual moving frame so that it would seem like the shack was swaying and creaking while the actors were inside. But it was also a lot safer than filming in a real abandoned building.
Welcome to the night bus, emergency transport for the stranded witch or wizard.
Did you know that the night bus is actually a real bus? And they really drove it around London. Check out these quick turns and all the swaying that would definitely make passengers a little queasy. A double-decker bus didn't cut it, so instead they took a normal bus and cut it in half, lifted it, then added a middle section, and drove it around the city. Here, you can see the interior scenes being filmed on a soundstage using a hydraulic moving platform. Peter Pettigrew is a sinister villain. Sure, he might not be the brightest or the most terrifying, but he did put Voldemort's plans into action. However, it's not nearly as easy to take him seriously behind the scenes, especially when Sirius tries to get his revenge on a fake rat. But we gotta say, the actual rat actor who plays Scabbers is pretty cute.
Scabbers, you're alive!
Prisoner of Azkaban actually gave a lot of animal actors their big breaks, especially these surprisingly well-behaved crows and bats. They were trained by the film's animal trainer, Gary Garrow, but it was definitely difficult to get them go where they needed to at all times, and for the young actors to get used to all the fluttering around their heads while they were trying to remember their lines. Another interesting fact, Crookshanks, whose real name is Crackerjack, by the way, has such nice fur that they had to add these clumps to it before filming.
Have some jelly and put it on his eyes to make them look all weepy so he's not so handsome.
What about the cast that almost was? Hogwarts almost had a different headmaster, with both of these white wizards, Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Christopher Lee, being considered to play Dumbledore in the third film. But it was Richard Harris, who passed away after playing Dumbledore in the first two films, who ultimately had the final say. He wasn't a big fan of McKellen's, so the actor decided out of respect not to take the role. Christopher Lee was focusing more on playing villains at the time, so he passed too. Instead, we got Michael Gambon, who brought the perfect amount of wisdom and charisma to scenes like these. And he had a good time doing it.
Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times.
Prisoner of Azkaban was filmed on location in Scotland, where it rained for 28 days straight. Sets were constantly being washed out. The actors had to be followed around with umbrellas, and they even had to use helicopters like this one to fly in gravel to fill in areas that had been wiped away by all the water. But one perk to all that rain was that it created a constantly gloomy and gray tone, which ended up being perfect for the movie.
The Yule Ball is first and foremost a dance.
You might think that battles, monsters, and magic spells would have been the biggest challenges behind making Harry Potter, but one unexpected scene proved to be the scariest of all: the Yule Ball.
I think I take the dragon right now.
That's right. By the time the Goblet of Fire rolled around, the cast and crew were already total pros at filming those big, complicated action scenes. But dancing, dressing up, and romance? Well, that was a whole other story. You'd think that having to pretend to cast spells, fight enormous dragons and other magical creatures, and survive countless near-death experiences would be the toughest parts of acting in Harry Potter movies. But it turns out that there was one thing that terrified the actors more than any threatening obstacles they had ever faced before, and that was...
what?
Dancing. While they all knew it was coming, when it came to having to learn to not only dance, but ballroom dance during the Yule Ball, not a single one of the young actors were looking forward to it. Well, that's not totally true. According to Emma Watson, there was a big difference between the girls and boys. The girls were all pretty excited to give it a try, but the boys, on the other hand, wanted nothing to do with it.
The girls are so eager and the guy is just not there, not wanting to do it at all.
And we don't really blame them. Not only did they have to ballroom dance for the first time in their lives, they had to do it in front of hundreds of other kids and an entire crew. Safe to say, they were terrified.
I think the kids were all quite scared of having to dance formally.
But no one had it quite as tough as Rupert, who, if you remember in the movie, had to take a dance lesson in front of everyone with Professor McGonagall herself, Maggie Smith. Apparently, he felt just as awkward about it as Ron did, because when he sat back down next to Oliver and James Phelps, who played Fred and George, he muttered to them not to say a word about what had just happened. So, of course they had to poke fun at him. And it doesn't seem like it was all that easy for Maggie either.
Was pretty strenuous.
But don't worry, they weren't just thrown in front of the camera and told to waltz perfectly. They actually had 3 weeks of full-time dance training before they started to film the Yule Ball scenes. Working with professional ballroom dance teachers and choreographers definitely helped them get the steps down. But that doesn't mean they all turned into mini Zac Efrons, prancing around with all the confidence in the world. Oh no. Many of the actors still would have passed on the dancing entirely if they were given the chance. Matthew Lewis, who plays the notoriously awkward Neville Longbottom, definitely didn't relish the whole experience of learning the complicated ballroom steps one bit. Luckily for Tom Felton, he knew that he wasn't the only one out there who was feeling a little foolish, and that everyone around him was feeling just as silly as he was. So it wasn't all bad. While everyone else was getting the hang of it with weeks of group training, poor Daniel was so busy filming other scenes that he was actually only given 4 days to catch up and learn the moves before they were set to film. And not only does he have to dance, he has to dance in front of the entire school with the other champions. So the pressure was really on for the young actor's first ever dance scene. Luckily, Harry was never supposed to be the best dancer in the world, so all of his adorable missteps and less than smooth moves were totally perfect for the character at that moment, who was also completely terrified and in way over his head. Finally, they did manage to finish all of the formal dance moments and could move on to the more fun Weird Sisters concert. After all of the stress and tension of making sure that every waltz step was perfect, the whole cast was finally allowed to really let loose and mosh for the first time ever at Hogwarts. And yet, even that sounds a lot easier than it actually is, when you're 100 teenagers in wizard robes trying to forget about the giant cameras circling around you. But they managed to totally pull it off and give the scene the burst of energy that it needed. One of the things we love about the Harry Potter movies is that we got to watch the characters really grow up over the course of 8 movies. And that goes for the actors too, which is really what set the Goblet of Fire apart from all the other movies that had come before. For the first time, the actors and the characters were teenagers, and that brought on a ton of changes, which became very obvious when it came time to film the Yule Ball. The producers and all the other older actors noticed such a difference in the way the young cast behaved around one another, and just how awkward things were starting to get, which they thought was totally perfect for the energy of the entire movie, and especially the formal dancing celebrating the Triwizard Tournament. When you watch the scene and see how awkward it is for the boys and girls to interact once they're all dressed up, most of what you see is totally real. When it came to asking Cho Chang out to the dance, Daniel Radcliffe didn't have to work hard to tap into how uncomfortable it can be to ask out your crush. And Rupert Grint actually thought the acting part was a whole lot easier than having to ask someone out for real.
In real life, it's pretty scary.
There is really no way for us to talk about the Yule Ball without talking about the awesome costumes that made the whole thing come to life. The costume designer knew that fans' expectations were going to be really high for this moment, so she and her team worked hard to bring a high level of fantasy to the big screen. And there is no doubt that the entire cast were really excited to get to change out of their school robes and into their finest dress robes for a night. Well, almost the entire cast. While everyone else got to dress up and look their best, we all know what happened to Ron.
Mum sent me a dress.
And it's safe to say that Rupert Grint wasn't all that happy about it either. But there was one reveal that did take everyone's breath away. In a good way. When Hermione first stepped out in her pink gown, a lot of fans were a bit disappointed that it wasn't the blue they had imagined from reading the book. But what they didn't know is how many different versions of the dress were designed, before finally settling on the light pink one that really suited Emma Watson's version of Hermione the best. It wasn't all glitz and glamour, however, as Emma tripped on her long skirt and almost fell down the stairs on her first take.
I was absolutely terrified.
Once they were all in costume and ready to go, the actors were brought into the famously breathtaking Great Hall, and for a handful of the actors, the set really did take their breath away. The crew had really built huge crystal icicles that hung from the magic ceiling, brought in Christmas trees that stood multiple stories high, and added a ton of incredibly ornate decorations on all of the walls and tables, transforming the already impressive Great Hall into the ice palace that everyone who read the book had imagined. Of course, some things in the wizarding world couldn't be done for real, so with the help of a little bit of CGI magic, the Great Hall was really brought to life for the final film. Animators added gently falling snow that never quite reached the ground, a night sky full of glittering stars above the dance floor, and torches glowing warmly along the halls in order to truly capture just how enchanting the Yule Ball would have been. All of the hard work that went into the making of the Yule Ball, from the dancing to the costumes to the amazing set that was made even more beautiful through CGI, came together to create something that really was magic. After all of that, they must have been thrilled to go back to fighting dragons in the Dark Lord. You know, the easy stuff.
Floor is it's like a special material, so you keep having to wear these sort of blue shoe covers.
Over a decade later, we're still discovering behind-the-scenes secrets from the Harry Potter franchise. Today, we're covering all the must-know trivia from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. How did the actors cause chaos on a construction set? Why did Daniel Radcliffe's scream have to be silent?
So that's your bit of knowledge for today.
Working on a movie in the Harry Potter franchise means a lot of time on set, which also means a lot of time to fill with activities and shenanigans. When shooting Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the cast had a variety of activities to keep them busy when they weren't learning potions and battling the Dark Lord. When they weren't playing Quidditch, the young wizards were outside playing another sport: cricket. That's right, here we can see Matthew Lewis and Alfred Enoch sharpening up their cricket skills. Or trying to, at least. We wonder how often they took homework breaks.
Got some in for one of the tutors, which I haven't done.
Daniel Radcliffe and Gary Oldman didn't just bond on screen, they spent quality time together off screen as well.
How many films have you done? 40-something. There must be now.
As for Nymphadora Tonks actress Natalia Tena, music was more her style. Here she is in her trailer playing some of her own original songs. Evidently, the cast is full of surprise talents. It wasn't all fun and games, though. Remember that many of the actors were still in school and regularly needed to do homework. The team did take a planned 9-week break from filming for Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson. The two actors had to do some major school exams.
I have worked hard every single day that I was at that school.
While the actors were working, they got to learn some new skills in the wizarding world. With wand choreography. Since the 5th film in the series incorporated a lot of high-level wand work, Paul Harris, a dance choreographer, was brought in to teach the actors how best to work with the styles and techniques to really bring their wizarding to life. They had 5 basic moves to use, with every character adding their own special touches to each according to their personality. This work was definitely intense. So much so that many of the actors actually wound up breaking their wands, resulting in them using rubber ones instead, which were more durable than the wood.
Breaking the most wands throughout the films, I think it's about 10.
At the time of this film, the record holder for the most wands broken was Devon Murray, who'd already gone through 10 different wands. Wands can be very dangerous business, and no one would know that better than Matthew Lewis, who suffered a perforated eardrum after Helena Bonham Carter accidentally stabbed his ear with a wand. Speaking of Bonham Carter, the actress happened to have some enhancements for the movie. She'd had chicken fillet inserts to put inside her bra while shooting.
What's this rubbish?
What's this rubbish, she says.
This could sort of be considered character work. The Weasley twins were always practicing to up their trickery game. The actors were notorious for playing little pranks on set, but one really blew them all away and actually got the twins and their little sister into a bit of trouble. There was a big construction site across from a studio the movie was shooting in, and the Weasley siblings weaseled their way onto the site's walkie-talkie channel. There were plenty of devices around the set, so the actors thought it would be fun to tell the construction workers that they could go home, and it probably was. Until the gaffer caught them and gave them a very good talking to.
And say, mischief managed. Otherwise anyone can read it.
There were some more laughs that happened on set that weren't trick-related. Those came around with the kissing scenes. Remember how the trio giggled throughout talking about Harry kissing Cho?
I'm sure Harry's kissing was more than satisfactory.
All that was real. The actors kept cracking up and it was just so enjoyable that the team kept the cameras rolling and it made the final edit. It's no surprise considering there was quite a build-up. Katie Leung was pretty nervous about the kiss and really prepared herself mentally beforehand. But then, when the planned shoot date came, the kiss had to wait because Radcliffe wound up being sick.
Daniel is a very good kisser.
When it came to stunts, Rupert Grint had a pretty strange experience when shooting the scene where Hermione throws Ron across a room. Usually, there would just be a harness, but to really help show the stunt realistically, Grint was strapped to a much larger man who was moving up and down a ladder. It is pretty hard to think of Harry Potter without Emma Watson, Rupert Grint, and Daniel Radcliffe at the center of the movies, but the fact is, Order of the Phoenix was almost Watson's last film with the franchise. The actress had seriously considered leaving the role so she could concentrate on other pursuits. After taking some time to weigh the pros and cons, Watson felt that it would have been way too strange to watch any other actress play the role that she'd grown up doing, so she made the choice to stay until the end. We are definitely glad she did.
I definitely made the right decision.
Another gem from the wizarding world is Luna Lovegood. It was the role of a lifetime for the actress, since she'd actually been a fan of the series since she was 8 years old. And her favorite character was? You guessed it, Luna.
Well, if I were you-know-who, I'd want you to feel cut off from everyone else.
She got to bring a bit more of herself to the role as well. The multi-talented actress actually made the radish earrings that we see her wearing. Building the incredible settings we see throughout the 5th film is extensive and always impressive. Sometimes it could even be pretty dangerous. The Ministry of Magic building took 22 weeks to build and was only on screen for about 10 minutes total. The set was, of course, rigged up to be exploded, meaning if the cast had their cell phones on set, they could have accidentally triggered it and blown the set up. There were also some buildings that were just too expensive to be in the movie. Sirius Black's London residence, Grimmauld Place, was built by the film team since the building they needed to shoot in would have been too expensive. It says a lot, considering the fact that constructing a set like this isn't that cheap either. Speaking of the Black family, This gorgeous family tree has the names of over 70 different members of the Black family that J.K. Rowling created for the movie.
I've never used the visitor's entrance before. Should be fun.
The Ministry of Magic was brought to life with two very different techniques: painted cardboard and full-on CGI. While pretty well every setting in the movies is epic, the Department of Mysteries, where this wild battle takes place, was actually the very first shot in the movies to be entirely created with CGI. We don't blame them, considering how major that cleanup would have been.
Get back to the door!
We're a bit surprised the team didn't choose to use CGI for the 30,000 individual tiles that were added to the Ministry set by hand. The so-called tiles were actually made out of cardboard covered in very thick paint, as real tiles would have been far too expensive. The ingenuity of the team doesn't stop there, though. How does Mad-Eye Moody manage to ride a broomstick with a prosthetic leg? A specially customized broom. Instead of the stirrups the other actors used, actor Brendan Gleeson rode a broom that had posts at the front for his legs and a seat for him to sit on.
Stay in formation, everyone. Don't break ranks.
One of our absolute favorite references in the whole movie has to be Harry's nod to a beloved character, Remus Lupin.
You know, the very first time I saw you, Harry, I recognized you immediately.
If Harry's teaching fashion is familiar, then it's probably because it's very closely modeled after the clothes Professor Lupin wore during Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Radcliffe brought the idea to his producers because he thought it would be a good way to pay respect to the professor he'd looked up to so much.
People like me are, well, let's just say that I'm used to it by now.
The creative choices in this film really made it a standout. One in particular still manages to move us every time we see it: Harry's scream after Sirius Black passes away. The choice to make the heartbreaking moment silent was reportedly because the actual scream recorded was so painful that it made Emma Watson and Helena Bonham Carter actually cry. We can't even imagine watching and hearing this scene in person. The original audio has still never been released publicly. As for this terrifying moment, the wacky eye color change Harry has is courtesy of CGI, as opposed to contacts, since, of course, Radcliffe wasn't able to wear contacts. As with all the films, they aren't entirely consistent with what's written in the novels. One of the more notable changes in this movie was, of course, the purple hair Tonks has instead of the signature pink she's described as having in the novel. The team felt pink was too associated with Dolores Umbridge and didn't want there to be any connections between the two characters. The purple hairdo took about 30 minutes to prepare every single day, with part of her real hair that had been dyed, as well as a purple lace wig that she had on. Another change was Kreacher being included in the movie. While his role isn't huge, it was important enough to add to the script after J.K. Rowling insisted he be included, in order for other scenes that needed to happen in future to make sense. All his scenes were actually added after the principal shooting. Then, of course, how could we forget Nigel? Well, if you've only read the books, then you absolutely wouldn't know who Nigel is, since he was a character created just for the movie, without any mention in the book series. As for the characters that were in the novels, the Bellatrix Lestrange we got in the movies was almost played by another actress pretty close to home. Helen McCrory was originally set to play Bellatrix, but after learning she was pregnant, the role went to Helena Bonham Carter. Luckily, we did get to meet her later on as Narcissa Malfoy. Both roles are pretty impeccably cast in the end.
Protect him from harm. Want the inside scoop on Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince? We've got you covered. We all know and love the Harry Potter series, with the Half-Blood Prince being one of the classics. But did you know about all the magic and effort put into the behind-the-scenes production that made the movie come to life?
Wand's ready, broomstick's ready, and away we go!
Right from the get-go, it seems like Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is chock full of special and practical effects, which make the film stand out. As the production team has let on, this Harry Potter film has about the same amount of special effects as any of the other films. These special effects stand apart from the other films, though, in how they are integrated into the scenes. The use of CGI and other effects is much more blended into the real-world acting and settings that the film uses.
With explosive devices in all the various different parts of the bathroom, so as soon as you just bell, someone blow it up.
The behind-the-scenes of these effects makes the film all the more interesting to watch in its final form. It's crazy to think about all the possibilities that arise when a simple green screen is involved. Green screens were used throughout this film to create the CGI effects that blow viewers away. For the Quidditch scenes in the film, the use of blue screens was truly imperative to creating the right shots. In reality, actors were simply seated on bicycle seats and fitted with a harness on something that resembled a broomstick while placed in front of a blue screen. All the magic of the Quidditch game and the intense background and action were mostly added in digitally.
It's quite tricky filming that, because there's nothing to react to.
One really interesting and unique iteration of the green screen is in the magical bookshelf scene of the Half-Blood Prince. In this behind-the-scenes look, we can see green hands extending from the bookshelves that Hermione is standing in front of. In the end, these hands would be digitally erased, leaving behind the effect of books magically being placed back in their rightful spots within the library.
Pie? Not for me, no.
In the Burrow Burn scene, we can see a green, well, blue, screen extending in the background of the shot. This blue screen was used to enhance the locational setting where the scene was actually taking place. In the Burrow Burn scene, wherein the Weasley family home is attacked by Bellatrix Lestrange, special and practical effects were used to set the stage for the gruesome attack on the family home. The special effects team used real fire to simulate the attack, with a ring of fire spreading around the set at almost 420 feet long. Special effects specialist John Richardson claimed that the Ring of Fire was definitely a learning process, as the crew had to learn and relearn what ways to make the fire work best on the set.
You're Aragog, aren't you?
Yes.
The character, if you can call it that, of Aragog was also a huge component of the practical effects that made the film truly stand out. The practical effects team needed to make a completely new giant spider for this film, says makeup and creature effects designer Nick Dudman.
But it's the same character and he looks essentially the same. Although we've upgraded him a little.
Says Dudman. In the creation of this spidery creature, the special effects team chose a material to produce the spider that was translucent to try to mimic what a real dead bug might look like. It took a team of over a dozen people to work on Aragog, including tasks like filling the mold to airbrushing final details. In fact, it took a team of 6 to 7 people just to work on placing the spider hairs on the giant creature, which took weeks on end. The amount of effort that went into creating this giant spider really paid off when paired with the acting seen in the film.
Seriously misunderstood creatures spiders are. It's the eyes, I reckon, they unnerve some folk.
As Nick Dudman states,
very often, even just an inanimate object like that can have a little emotive moment, which is nice.
Bringing the cave scene to magical life was a hugely important step in the process of making the Half-Blood Prince. The production team did a lot of research on caves, looking into different rock formations to use, leading them to the crystal cave idea. They visited a quartz crystal cave in Switzerland and a salt cave in Germany to find inspiration. They also took inspiration from the Cliffs of Moher in Ireland for the iconic cave scene. The set itself was too large of a scale to fully build, so the team took to using CGI to animate the setting, having gained confidence from their first all-CG scene in Harry Potter 5.
You should have let me, sir.
Oh, no, Harry. Your blood's much more precious than mine.
As the film opens, the viewers watch as Death Eaters make their way through both the Wizarding World and the Muggle World, tearing apart a pedestrian bridge as they fly through the sky. It's interesting to take an exclusive look behind the scenes of the making of this scene, as a lot more went into it than one might initially expect. What you might not have figured out about this scene is the insane amount of effort that went into getting those soaring shots through the British skies. It took the use of one helicopter and one stabilized camera to get the perfect shot, and then, obviously, quite a bit of CGI magic to place the Death Eaters within the scene. The acting in all the Harry Potter films worked to set these mainly child star-studded films apart from the rest. It's no surprise that the acting performances from stars like Emma Watson, Daniel Radcliffe, and Rupert Grint also shine through in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. But what were their experiences like behind the scenes and on set? Let's dive in.
Don't you trust me?
Let's start off with the acting involved in Harry and Ginny's love story. The blossoming of Harry and Ginny's romance takes a central role in The Half-Blood Prince, with the first kiss shared between the two counting as a pivotal scene in the film. As the actors behind the kiss dished, it wasn't as smooth and romantic in real life as it seemed in the film.
When everyone comes in and have a look at the scene, lighting all the crew, it's a bit embarrassing, but I think after a while, you just gotta accept it.
Daniel Radcliffe revealed that the kiss scene was a bit awkward for him since he knew actress Bonnie Wright, who plays Ginny, since she was just a child of about 10 years old.
So, it's a bit weird doing all that, but it's fine.
This scene was the very first one that Bonnie actually shot on set, making the tension almost palpable to the young actress. She stated that, "I think the first time is always the worst, but after that it's just like any other scene that you're filming, so it was actually easier than I realized." Harry was also involved in some behind-the-scenes goofing with co-star Emma Watson. In the magical library scene, Watson hit Radcliffe over the head so hard by accident, he even said, "You can really hear the crunch of paper on bone."
You're laughing because you hit me so hard, aren't you? Okay.
Similarly, Lavender and Ron's kiss scene was also filled with a bit of tension and awkwardness.
It's just such a weird sort of thing. You've got everyone watching you and it just doesn't feel very...
This kiss scene was at a whole new level of weird in comparison to Harry and Ginny's, because it took place in front of dozens of extras. Daniel Radcliffe in particular was extremely excited about this kiss scene, making a point to be present off camera while the smooch took place on screen.
I don't think Rupert had done a kissing scene. That was entirely new territory for him.
Talk about friends cheering each other on. Jessie Cave, who plays Lavender, revealed that it was actually the most awkward to film the rehearsal scene when it was just her, Rupert, and the director, because that was much more intimate of a kiss than the one in front of the cast was. She claimed that the awkwardness of the kiss was not really a big deal to her, but her true fear when kissing Rupert...
I was more concerned anyway about honestly chipping a tooth. I really was worried.
Another interesting, yet much more serious note about the acting during The Half-Blood Prince was Maggie Smith's health during filming. The actress who famously plays Professor McGonagall in the series was actually undergoing breast cancer treatment during the time of filming. She was working on set while undergoing chemotherapy at the same time, which was no small feat, as the actress said she was in pain constantly and also feeling deathly sick. Smith tried to make light of the situation and is even quoted saying, "I was hairless. I had no problem getting the wig on. I was like a boiled egg." It's clear that the special effects and the actors both worked to make this film truly special. But what about the rest of the production team that also made the magic of The Half-Blood Prince come to life? It's clear that the production decisions from the screenwriters to the director worked to make this chapter of the Harry Potter series truly special. The director of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, David Yates, truly shared a unique bond with the actors on set, making their relationship, as well as his professional choices, inherently important to the production of HP6.
Not just for me as a storyteller, but also with the actors. I wanted to see them play more comedy.
Some of his decisions were a bit controversial, despite his general popularity among the actors on set. It's been revealed that screenwriter Steve Kloves actually argued back and forth with Yates over whether or not they should include more pensive memory scenes showing Voldemort's background in the movie. Yates ended up actually vetoing the writer's wishes, opting for less of the Voldemort flashbacks to be included in the film.
Who are you? Well, I'm like you, Tom. I'm different. Prove it.
Film editor Mark Day was also a big player in the creation of The Half-Blood Prince, and his decisions also influenced the way the film came out for sure. With a total of 5 editors for the Harry Potter series in total, Mark Day has stuck around to edit 2 of them. In total, Day worked for 14 months editing the film, making decisions when to cut to different shots within a scene and being responsible for more than 1,700 edits within the film.
Editing is very subjective, and so what you may think is a good cut, I may not.
Not only do the director and editors have big roles in the production process, but so do lesser acknowledged team members like stunt specialists. They're in charge of all the Quidditch acrobatics that the actors have to perform, including some of these impressive and not so impressive saves made by the keeper Ron Weasley behind the scenes. And we can't forget the important makeup artists, like Amanda Knight, who make all the magic of the story really come to life before our eyes. As we can see here, Amanda transforms actress Emma Watson by giving her the dark mark with a temporary tattoo.
I'd have to say, it would be a wonderful way to travel in a sidecar.
As the iconic Harry Potter film franchise was closing in on its climax, the set provided plenty of pulse-racing stunts and heartfelt send-offs. Today, we're covering the must-know moments from the Deathly Hallows Part 1. How did they pull off the 7 Harrys scene? What was the final day on set like?
I was so upset on the last day. I really was. Everyone was.
Much of the Deathly Hallows Part 1 takes place in the real world, or the Muggle world for you wizards out there. And in order to pull that off, the production found itself filming all over the UK. and having the cast perform in these very real environments. But some sequences were a little too dangerous for actors to do themselves. That was the case for Harry's dangerous ride with Hagrid to the Weasley house. While Daniel Radcliffe was in the sidecar for a shot or two, the rest of the time it was his stunt double, Mark Maley.
I'm yet to travel more than about 3 meters in it, but those 3 meters were some of the funnest I've ever had.
7 identical motorbikes were built for different stunts in the scene, including for flying, flipping upside down, crashing into the water for the landing, and traveling as fast as 40 miles per hour in the actual Liverpool-Queensbury tunnel. Even though Radcliffe missed out on these stunts firsthand, he found the bright side in being represented by Maley.
And also a plus side of having Mark W is that he's legendary for having a very, very nice bump.
The location for the set of Godric's Hollow was dictated largely by an actual cedar tree. Production designer Stuart Craig found the tree in the garden at the legendary Pinewood Studios and built the tiny town with it in mind, using it as the centerpiece of the graveyard. The crew also did quite a number on resident Bathilda Bagshot's creepy home, lining the rooms with dusty boxes, clothes, and even making books that the character had written herself. Inside Bathilda Bagshot's home, Daniel Radcliffe did his own stunts when taking on Voldemort's pet snake, Nagini. To give Daniel the experience of being attacked by CGI Nagini, the stunt coordinator, Greg Powell, used a pole with a boxing glove tied to the end to poke and push Radcliffe.
We've had some crazy things fill in for whatever the creature's supposed to be.
But on one take, Powell went a little overboard and ended up giving Radcliffe a fat lip when the chair he was using as a shield hit him in the face. Radcliffe, however, took the minor injury in stride.
So I had a fat lip for about a day, but it's really calmed down, so I'm feeling pretty good, which is good because I've got a photo shoot on Sunday.
When it comes to filming in real-world locations, Piccadilly Circus in London is apparently a pretty big deal.
You do have to watch the moment where we shut down Piccadilly Circus for the first time in 32 years.
Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson walked through the world-famous site surrounded by an insane 500 extras. The all-night cafe where the trio does battle with Voldemort loyalists has a real-world Easter egg of its own. The crew put up a poster of Equus, a stage play Daniel Radcliffe was starring in at the time. Placing the house elves, Dobby, and Creature in the same space as the actors required a collaboration of on-set stand-ins, actors who voiced the elves, and eventually CGI of the house elves themselves.
I'm a Dobby. So the moves, isn't it? He's Creature. But I'm better.
Stand-ins Diane Gibbons and Bindi Johal worked with the other actors on set, with their performances used as references by the VFX team to create the final sequences with the real Dobby and Creature. Actor Simon McBurney and Toby Jones ultimately voiced the house elves, with Toby Jones even coming on set for Dobby's emotional final scene.
I want to bury him. Properly. Without magic.
With a crazy 261 shooting days on the Deathly Hallows production, the cast and longtime friends had to find ways to keep things fresh on such a long shoot. Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint opted to invent their own game with mini table tennis paddles, hilariously dubbed Danger Ball.
For the second ever, but first outdoors, Danger Ball 2009 Championships.
Rupert Grint managed to find time to goof off on set as well. Grint and his off-screen twin brothers, Oliver and James Phelps, could usually be found messing around on segways and sneaking into the studio at night.
We've actually been kind of riding our bikes all through the set.
And before filming Wrapped, Rupert, the Phelps twins, and Draco Malfoy actor Tom Felton got a chance to go golfing together, though some were definitely worse than others.
It's not a very good golfer, actually.
Things got a lot more competitive during the chase in the woods scene, where Ron, Harry, and Hermione are on the run from Death Eaters. It wasn't long at all before the trio were treating each take like a race.
They're all going to say to the fastest.
I am.
Emma said Emma, probably, didn't she? She's wrong, I'm fast.
It got so competitive that director David Yates had to remind them that the most important thing was what was best for the film, and not who was the fastest. But Daniel was more than happy to settle it once and for all at a later date.
Call it red carpet next premiere, we'll do it, we'll have a race, man. Make it 100 yards, I'll do it.
When it came time to do Harry and Hermione's steamy kiss, Ron wasn't actually there to see his own Horcrux-induced vision. The intimate scene required that both Daniel and Emma be topless and covered in silver paint. So in order to make the two as comfortable as possible, everyone who didn't need to be on set for it wasn't, including Rupert Grint. Watson confirmed the decision, saying, "They did, yes. It was a closed set, and it was awkward enough without having tons of people come and watch." The first of the original cast to wrap for good was fittingly the Dursleys.
This isn't just goodbye, boy, is it? This is farewell.
Fiona Shaw, Richard Griffiths, and Harry Melling were the first along with Radcliffe to film for the Harry Potter series 10 years prior in The Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, depending on where you are in the world. In the time since, the family's relationship had evolved off-screen as well, with Radcliffe and Griffiths acting together in a stage play, and Melling and Shaw doing the same. While the epilogue from Part 2 was the final scene, it was not the last thing that was filmed. The final day of filming was done at Leavesden Studios, the same place where they started on the first film 10 years before.
Big space at the back has been reserved for me, so that's what I have to do today.
After the final shot, which had Harry, Ron, and Hermione leaping to escape the Ministry of Magic, the crew surprised them with a heartfelt video chronicling the past 200+ days on the production.
I've loved every minute in it, and thank you all very, very much.
Daniel Radcliffe really got a chance to show off his acting chops when he was tasked with playing 7 versions of Harry that were being impersonated by 7 different characters.
7 Harrys, this is the most complicated scene in the world!
In order to pull this off, Radcliffe was coached by each actor on their characters' mannerisms and movements.
It was really fun. It's bloody confusing though.
He managed to impress not only the actors, but David Yates as well.
Dan plays women really well, actually.
While Radcliffe pulled them all off splendidly, he did take to some quicker than others, specifically Emma Watson's Hermione.
Harry, your eyesight really is awful.
Often, it's the details that really elevate a film to the next level, and The Deathly Hallows was no different. These key artistic decisions and contributions came from not only the crew, but even the talented cast as well. Magical tents had been introduced in The Goblet of Fire, and in The Deathly Hallows Part 1. They came back in a big way. Set decorator Stephanie McMillan and production designer Stuart Craig designed a gorgeous magical tent for the setting of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour's wedding.
You know, they've got the lights that hover and the tables look good. It is definitely a French influence.
In stark contrast to the grand purple wedding tent is the tiny plain tent Harry, Ron, and Hermione travel with for the bulk of the film.
Yeah, I'm still here.
McMillan and Craig's aim was to make it look almost identical to the one in the Goblet of Fire, at least on the outside.
It's amazing how much, richness and interest you can get out of a couple of sheets of canvas, basically.
Actor Warwick Davis has played more than one character during his time on the Harry Potter films, and the one role that he is probably least recognizable in is Griphook the Goblin. Chief Moldmaker led a team of artists that worked together to give Davis his goblin face. Each piece of the prosthetic mask had to be carefully placed on one at a time, in a process that took about 4 hours to apply and another hour to remove.
Consider yourself lucky, goblin.
The prosthetic mask and accompanying contacts made it so difficult to see that every goblin actor, including Davis, required a chaperone to get around the set.
Hello. Ready for the office.
Talented actor Ivana Lynch, who portrayed the peculiar Luna Lovegood,
It's a charm, actually. Keeps away the narwhals.
was well known around the production for making artistic contributions to her character. But those contributions extended to the set itself when she inspired the design of the Lovegood house. Lynch created drawings of magical beasts in the style of Luna herself, which were used as a reference for the paintings that ultimately covered every inch of the Lovegood home. But Ivana Lynch made sure not to ignore her beloved character, inventing the dance Luna and her father perform at Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour's wedding.
She's so in touch with her spirit that she's not really affected by other people.
Hopefully someday Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint will make an official rule book for Danger Ball, so we can all play.
I haven't really thought about it, because we've still got a long way to go yet on this one.
It's a very messy time for the castle, literally.
Just like Hogwarts, the Harry Potter films are full of secrets and facts that even the most dedicated fans aren't aware of. The Deathly Hallows Part 2 was an epic finale to the franchise, but behind the scenes it was packed with major challenges, record-breaking moments, and a very emotional cast. Ready to dive into this Chamber of Secrets?
Rupert was like, I don't know how we're going to do it. And I was like, I've got no idea either.
Since 2001, Harry Potter had been making the impossible possible with their groundbreaking visual effects and mind-blowing costume and makeup department. So it only made sense that for their final film, they'd take all those special effects to another level. The Room of Requirement scene was so much more than just a final antic between the Gryffindors and Slytherins. That hidden classroom symbolized Harry's childhood at Hogwarts, a place he'd spent hours and hours in. A room that, at the end of the scene, would be completely destroyed. To make the scene even more impactful, the filmmakers filled the set with memorabilia from the 7 previous films, including the knight the Golden Trio used in their Philosopher's Stone chess game. But aside from the props, the rest of the scene was filmed with a whole lot of rope, green screen, and mechanical broomsticks that, according to Emma, weren't the most comfortable. The mechanical broomsticks worked a lot like an amusement park ride. And to take the edge off, the actors had their bottoms molded to create a seat they could sit on.
Even before they said go, it's sort of grabbing hold of the thing saying, don't let me fall.
Speaking of blasts from the past, another set that had to be recreated from the first films was Gringotts Bank. The Lestrange Vault break-in took a lot out of the prop department. Not only did they have to dig out and refurbish props from the first film, but had to construct 210,000 different gold trinkets so that they were able to fill the Lestrange Vault as much as possible before bringing in VFX for the Gemino Curse. While Gringotts took a lot out of the prop department, the Battle of Hogwarts was on a whole other level. The Battle of Hogwarts might just be the most difficult, but rewarding, sequence of the entire franchise. The planning of these moments happened 2 years before the film even released, when they traded in their physical Hogwarts replica for a digital one. The digital Hogwarts was the only way they'd be able to make the battle as realistic as possible. With a practical Hogwarts, we would have shot it last summer and been so tied down. Instead, as David Yates finds the flow and structure, we are able to handle new concepts and ideas.
It gives me tremendous freedom to move the camera in and around the place when it's being destroyed. That was quite useful.
Things like the magic shield were also incorporated into the digital Hogwarts afterward. However, they still did need to create the rubble of Hogwarts apart from the digital aspects. But the scene required a lot of running and chaos, meaning the filmmakers needed to make sure no one got hurt in the process. Because of this, every piece of rubble was made out of a foam-like material. For even more safety, during Voldemort and Harry's final battle, Ralph Fiennes and Daniel Radcliffe were surrounded by mats that they would edit out later. Even then, Dan still needed his stunt double to jump in for certain parts.
That was the scariest part. It was scary.
The tumultuous finale was so chaotic that some of the actors didn't even film their scenes together. Specifically, the moment when Harry is speaking to Helena Ravenclaw about the lost diadem.
You do know where he hid it.
Actress Kelly MacDonald filmed her part separately in the studio in front of a screen, because Daniel was not available that day. He filmed his part at another time, and the two clips were seamlessly added together. What if we told you that Robbie Coltrane wasn't the only one portraying Hagrid? In fact, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Robbie only played Hagrid when they needed shots of his face. For body shots, they'd use a stunt double who was able to balance pounds of padding while walking on stilts, and carrying a limp Harry Potter.
And the many things I like about him. Do you know what I mean?
We've discussed how epic of a job the prop department did on this film, but let's take a look and highlight some of the best work from the makeup department. At least the best, according to Daniel Radcliffe. They were tasked with making Ciarán Hinds as Aberforth look like Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. The before and after of Ciarán is mind-boggling. The process included a prosthetic forehead, eye bags, and a nose piece. Not only did he look eerily like his on-screen brother, but he was able to pull off the character seamlessly.
The fineness of the work they do, it's really special.
The Battle of Hogwarts wasn't just chaotic for the filmmakers, but for the actors as well. It took months to film, and because of how complex it was, the cast didn't get the fairy tale Harry Potter rap day they had been expecting. While the Battle of Hogwarts was the last scene for many of the cast, they would all rap sporadically. Each day after calling cut, the names of cast members who were rapping that day were read off of a list.
That is Alan and David Thewlis' last day on Harry Potter.
and Tom Felton said there wasn't even time to get emotional because of how bizarre it was. Even actor Mark Williams called rapping pretty underwhelming.
In a state of slightly heightened consciousness. Because any minute now, you're going to have to go.
Poor Rupert didn't even get to be in the final cast and crew picture because he wasn't on set that day. Instead, they included a cardboard cutout of him. But for Rupert, it wasn't the final cut that made him the most emotional. It was cleaning out the dressing room he'd spent the last decade in that did it for him. He said he found toys in the room from when he started the Harry Potter journey at just 11 years old. And it made him realize that saying goodbye to Potter also meant saying goodbye to his childhood.
It's kind of been my life every day, every hour. It's what it's all been about.
He wasn't the only one thinking that way either. Matthew Lewis also had plenty of moments of reflection on how much he'd grown alongside Neville and how much he cherished each moment, except for the fat suits he had to wear.
And they said, okay, we're going to have to do something about this. And that's when they came up with the idea of the fat suit I had to wear for several years.
In between farewell speeches and tears, Daniel, Emma, and Rupert still managed to exchange some heartwarming wrap gifts. Emma bought the boys inscribed personal journals. Dan got them framed pictures of memorable moments they had filming. And Rupert, he got them trumpets. Engraved trumpets. Even he doesn't know why he decided to go down the musical instrument route.
Rupert gave me a trumpet which he had self-engraved. I don't play the trumpet.
Speaking of memorable moments, Emma Watson shared what her most memorable scene was while filming Deathly Hallows Part 2, and it wasn't the most pleasant experience. Emma Watson says the worst scene in the entire film to shoot was when they get dropped into a lake by the dragon they're flying on. It was so cold that Rupert thought that his heart stopped. They weren't allowed to wear any clothes underneath because the next scene required them to change. She just couldn't wait for this scene to be over. Although the tone was oftentimes emotional on set, Ralph Fiennes made sure to keep everyone on their toes. How did he do that? With improv, of course. Like always, Voldemort's final speech to the students of Hogwarts and his Death Eaters was eerie and nothing short of epic.
From this day forth, you put your faith in me.
But it turns out that was all Ralph. Each take, he would divert from the script and improvise his speech in order to keep the rest of the cast alert and on their toes. Jason Isaacs called his performance utterly terrifying. If you thought the hug was super awkward between Voldemort and Draco, there's a reason why. Yes, it's because Voldemort is literally the most awkward being in the Harry Potter universe. But it was also because Ralph completely improvised it. It caught Tom off guard, which garnered an even better response from Tom. For Helena Bonham Carter and Emma Watson though, their scene was anything but improvised. The two actresses became extremely close on set of this film because of the fact they'd have to play one another in Gringotts. Emma took this very seriously. She wrote notes on Hermione for Helena that she could always have on her phone and even acted out the scene for her before it was time for her take.
You have to call me Emma.
Although this film was packed with the most talented actors and crew members in the UK, it didn't come without its challenges. The Deathly Hallows Part 2 had the largest cast in the franchise. This was mainly because of the Battle of Hogwarts scenes, where there were more than 400 actors on set at once. This led to a lot of chaos. Each of those 400 actors needed a custom costume and a unique wand.
We know each day that each student gets the same one they had the day before.
The Gringotts goblins may have been the most challenging part of filming. Each actor was wearing heavy-duty prosthetics that were customized to their face and took 8 months to prepare. They're so detailed that each individual strand of hair was sewed on by hand. The prosthetics were so advanced that they had to fly in 150 of the most skilled makeup artists around the globe to help them pull this off. To make matters worse, the prosthetics made it difficult for the actors to see, and they would need to have a leader guide them around the set each day. The end result, though, was nothing short of perfection.
Painstaking process of having their faces cast in plaster.
While this film had the biggest cast the franchise had ever seen, some people may be wondering why Crabbe, Draco's right-hand man, was missing from the final movie, especially because in the novel, he's the one who was meant to conjure the fiend fire that destroyed the Ravenclaw diadem Horcrux, and almost destroyed himself, Harry, and Draco. However, his actor Jamie Waylett got in trouble with the law for illegal substances and was removed from the franchise. Instead, they replaced his character with Blaise Zambini, another Slytherin. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 wrapped up a 10-year franchise that was part of so many people's lives. Without the efforts from the cast and crew behind the scenes, including the bonds created between the cast, putting together such an amazing conclusion wouldn't have been possible, even despite the challenges they faced. What behind the scenes fact did you find the most interesting? Let us know below. Thanks for watching.